I woke up that Tuesday morning feeling pretty good for a 68-year-old retired accountant. My house in Ohio was quiet, just the way I liked it after years of crunching numbers and keeping everything in order. I'd built up my savings carefully, never wasting a penny. After breakfast, I sat down at my computer to check my email, like I did every day. The top message caught my eye right away. It was from my bank, with the subject, "Funds transfer completed." I stared at it, confused. I hadn't transferred any money. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I clicked it open. The email looked real, with the bank's logo and all the usual details. It said a transfer of $50,000 had gone through successfully. My heart started racing. That was a big chunk of my retirement fund. I read it again, thinking it must be a mistake or some kind of spam. But the account numbers matched mine. How could this happen? I'd always been so careful with my passwords and security. No one else had access to my stuff. I picked up the phone to call the bank, my hands shaking a little. While it rang, I scrolled through the email trail. It showed the request had come from my own address. That didn't make sense. As the rep answered, I tried to stay calm. "Hello, this is Hector. I think there's been a mix-up with my account." She asked for my details and pulled up the records. "Yes, sir. The transfer was authorized via email from your registered address." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a glitch. Someone had pretended to be me. But who? And how? My stomach dropped when I saw the exact amount, $50,000. Just before you continue to watch, Joe would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage him to keep his streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. All right, back to the story. The email stared back at me from the screen, looking just like any other from my bank. It had the right logo, the right colors, even a timestamp that matched the morning. My mind raced to hackers or some scam from far away. I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank's customer service line right away. My heart thumped hard in my chest as I waited for the rep to pick up. "Hello, this is the fraud department. How can I help?" a calm voice said. I explained the email and the $50,000 transfer I never made. "Let me check your account, Mr. Hector," she replied after verifying my info. There was a long pause, keys clicking on her end. I expected her to say it was all a fake, maybe some phishing trick. But then she spoke again. "Sir, the transfer does show as completed. It was requested through your registered email address this morning." My breath caught. Requested through my email? I hadn't sent anything. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Yes, the authorization came from your IP and email. It looks legitimate on our end." I thanked her and hung up, my mind spinning. This was an outside fraud. Someone had used my own email to pull this off. But how? I double-checked my passwords. They were strong, changed often. No one knew them. How could anyone get into my account without my password? I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of it all. The bank rep's words echoed in my head. The transfer was from my email. "Can you tell me where the money went?" I asked, my voice steady but my mind racing. "Who got it?" She paused, like she was checking rules. "Sir, the recipient account is under the name Samuel Thompson. Does that ring a bell?" Samuel Thompson? Sam, my stepson. He was 26, still living in my house without paying a dime. He'd been there since his mom and I got married 10 years ago. I helped raise him, gave him everything. And now this. My hand tightened on the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. How could it be him? He knew my routines, had access to the Wi-Fi, maybe even peeked at my screen sometime. But spoofing my email? That meant faking it to look like me. He must have used some tech trick to send the request as if it came from my account. I thanked the rep and ended the call, staring at the wall. Sam, the kid I treated like my own, stealing $50,000 from my hard-earned savings. Betrayal hit like a punch. But why? For what? I needed proof before I did anything. Sam had spoofed my own email to steal from me. I hung up the phone and sat there for a minute, staring at the screen. My blood boiled, but I didn't rush upstairs to confront Sam. No, that would be a mistake. I'd spent decades as an accountant, auditing cheats and frauds. I knew one thing for sure. Patience always wins the game. Rushing and angry would tip him off, and he'd cover his tracks. Instead, I forced myself to act normal. I made a cup of coffee, sat back down, and pretended to browse the news. Inside, my mind raced with questions. How long had he been planning this? What else had he taken? But on the outside, I stayed calm as a pond. That evening, when Sam came down for dinner, I smiled like nothing was wrong. "How was your day, son?" I asked, passing him the potatoes. He mumbled something about job hunting, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, chatting about the weather. All the while, I watched him closely. After he went back to his room, I logged into our home router. The Wi-Fi log showed the transfer request had come from a device inside the house, his laptop's MAC address. It was undeniable now. The evidence trail was already forming. That evening, I decided to test the waters without showing my hand. Dinner was on the table, my wife chatting about her day at work. Sam slouched in his chair, scrolling on his phone like always. I waited for a quiet moment, then said casually, "Hey, Sam, you hear about these weird emails going around? Some scam stuff hitting people's banks." He looked up, shrugged his shoulders, and grinned that smug grin of his. "Nah, but old people always get hacked, right? You gotta be careful with those passwords, Hector." His words stung like a slap, but I kept my face straight. I even forced out a laugh, nodding like I agreed. "Yeah, you're probably right. Tech's not my strong suit." Inside, I was fuming. He sat there, eating the food I paid for, mocking me to my face. He thought he was so clever, pulling off that spoof without a trace. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the cocky one that said he believed he'd gotten away with it. My wife didn't notice a thing, just smiled and changed the subject. I cleared the plates, my mind already plotting the next steps. He had no clue I was onto him, gathering every bit of proof. He thought he'd outsmarted me, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. Over the next few days, I turned into a silent watcher in my own home. I didn't say a word about the theft, but I kept my eyes sharp on Sam. He started showing off new things almost right away. One morning, he came downstairs in shiny new sneakers that must have cost a couple $100. "Got him on sale," he said with a shrug when I asked. But I knew better. By afternoon, a package arrived, a fancy smartwatch with all the bells and whistles. He strapped it on like it was no big deal, fiddling with the screen while grinning. "Cool gadget, huh?" he bragged. My wife, his mom, just smiled and said it looked nice. She didn't question where the money came from. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she turned a blind eye because it was her son. Then came the expensive takeout deliveries almost every night. Steak from that upscale place downtown, sushi rolls that cost more than a week's groceries. He'd eat it in front of the TV, crumbs everywhere, acting like he earned it. I noted every single purchase in a little notebook I kept hidden, matching them to the timeline of my missing $50,000. The lies piled up too. He'd say he got freelance gigs online, but I knew he spent his days gaming. Sam was spending my retirement fund like Monopoly money. I needed more proof before I made my move, so I set up a small trap to test him. I had an old email account I barely used, linked to a savings account with just $500 in it. It was perfect bait, small enough not to raise big alarms, but enough to confirm what I suspected. That night at dinner, I brought it up casual-like. My wife was serving pasta, and Sam was shoveling it in like always. "You know," I said, "I found this dusty old email account today. Forgot all about it. There's even $500 sitting in the linked savings. Crazy how money hides sometimes." Sam didn't look up right away, but I caught it. A quick smirk as he stared at his plate, pretending to focus on his food. "Cool," he muttered, like it was no big deal. My wife laughed and said something about forgetting passwords. But I saw that gleam in his eye. He thought he had another easy score. I waited, checking the account every few hours. Nothing the first day, but patience was my weapon. I acted normal, went about my routine. 2 days later, $500 was gone. The $500 vanishing from that old account sealed it for me. I logged in that morning and saw the transfer confirmation staring back, straight to Sam's personal bank. No doubt left now. He wasn't just grabbing a quick buck. This was a pattern, a system he'd built to bleed me dry. The IP address matched his device, the timestamp fit when he was home alone, and the bank records tied it all together like a neat bow. I printed everything out, adding it to my growing file of evidence. That smirk from dinner replayed in my head, the one where he thought he was untouchable. He'd mocked me as an old fool, but I'd audited bigger cheats in my career, corporations hiding millions. Sam was small-time compared to that, but the betrayal cut deeper because he was family, or supposed to be. My wife still doted on him, making excuses for his laziness. "He's just finding his way," she'd say. But I saw the truth. He was a thief, living off my hard work while plotting more. I could have called the cops right then, but that felt too easy. He needed to learn a real lesson. But instead of confronting him, I began planning my revenge. With the test account drained, I knew I had to step up my game. Back in my days as an accountant, I'd audited folks for tax fraud, digging through records to find hidden lies and buried cash. I traced shady deals, exposed cheats, and even helped put a few behind bars. Those skills had gathered dust since I retired, but now they had a new purpose. The target wasn't some stranger in a suit. It was Sam, right under my roof. I set up a hidden folder on my computer, collecting every scrap of evidence. Bank statements, IP logs, screenshots of his purchases that matched the stolen amounts. I even noted the times he was alone in the house, lining them up with the transfers. Patience was key. I didn't want to spook him yet. Let him think he was winning. My wife noticed my quiet moods, but chalked it up to age. "You okay, Hector?" she'd ask. I'd smile and say I was fine, all while watching Sam strut around with his new gadgets. He had no clue I was turning the tables, using my old tricks to build a case that would trap him tight. Sam thought he could play games with me, but I was building the perfect counterattack. I kept building my plan, using what I knew from my auditing days to set traps. One afternoon, I left my checkbook open on my desk in the study, right where Sam could see it if he wandered by. I'd scribbled a fake account number on a sticky note next to it, making it look like a careless reminder to myself. It was all pretend. That number led to a dummy account I'd set up with the bank, just for this. I made sure to be out of the room, but close enough to watch. Sam came down the hall, pretending to head to the kitchen for a snack. He paused at the door, acting like he was just glancing around. But I saw it. His eyes flicked down to the checkbook, quick as a flash. He didn't touch it, just kept walking like nothing happened. But that was enough. The bait was set, and I knew he'd bite. Over the next few days, I checked the dummy account logs every morning. Nothing at first, but I stayed patient. Sam started acting a bit bolder, buying more stuff online. My wife noticed the deliveries but shrugged it off as young people things. I smiled and nodded, all while waiting. Within a week, that fake number showed up in a transfer attempt. I knew I couldn't take Sam down alone without solid backup, so I started gathering allies quietly. First, I called the bank's fraud division from my study, door closed tight. "I've noticed suspicious activity on my account," I told the specialist on the line. I laid out the transfers, the $50,000, the $500 test, describing the spoofed emails and IP matches without mentioning names. I made it sound like some clever outsider had hacked me from afar. The specialist listened carefully, asking for details like timestamps and device info. "This looks like sophisticated fraud," he said. "We'll flag your accounts immediately and monitor every transaction. If anything moves, we'll freeze it and alert you." I thanked him, feeling a spark of relief. They promised to investigate deeper, pulling logs and tracing origins. Little did they know, the external party was right here in my house. I also reached out to an old colleague from my auditing days, a guy who now worked in cybersecurity. "Hypothetical question," I said. He gave me tips on securing my systems and spotting more spoofs. With the bank on alert and my notes growing, I felt stronger. My wife chatted away in the kitchen, oblivious. Sam lounged on the couch, gaming. They had no idea the suspect was eating dinner at my table. As the days went on, Sam's arrogance grew like a weed I couldn't pull yet. He started making late-night phone calls to his buddies, thinking the house was asleep. I'd hear him through the thin walls, bragging about easy money falling into his lap. "Man, it's like taking candy from a baby," he'd laugh. "People are too dumb to protect themselves these days. One click, and boom, cash in my pocket." He didn't stop there. One night, I caught him mocking me directly. "Yeah, the old man wouldn't know a spoof from a spam ad." He chuckled into the phone. "He's clueless with tech. I could drain him dry, and he'd blame some hacker in Russia." His words hit like knives, but I stayed silent in my bed, letting him dig his hole deeper. My wife slept soundly beside me, unaware of the poison in her son's voice. I watched him strut around the house more boldly, flashing his new stuff like trophies. He even started skipping his fake job hunts, lounging all day. But I wasn't idle. I'd placed a small baby monitor outside his door, hidden behind a plant. It picked up every call, every boast. I saved the recordings in my hidden file, timestamps and all. His overconfidence was my best weapon. Every word was recorded on the baby monitor I'd placed outside his door. One Friday night, everything came to a head. I'd been restless, my mind too full of plans to sleep deep. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft footsteps creaking down the hall. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake my wife, and peeked through a crack in the door. There was Sam, sneaking toward my study like a shadow. He didn't glance back, thinking the house was dead asleep. I followed on silent feet, staying in the dark hallway. The study door was ajar. I'd left it that way on purpose, another small trap. He slipped inside, and I positioned myself just outside, heart pounding but steady. Through the gap, I watched him sit at my desk, boot up my computer like it was his own. He typed in what must have been a guest password or some hack he'd learned. His face glowed in the screen light, confident and cocky as he clicked through folders, hunting for accounts. He didn't know I had everything locked down now, with alerts set to ping my phone. But seeing him there, bold as brass, rifling through my life, it boiled my blood. No more watching from the sides. That was the night I decided the hammer would fall. After seeing Sam sneak into my study that night, I knew it was time to set the real trap. I couldn't let him keep thinking he was invincible. The next morning, while he was still asleep, I went to the bank in person. I explained to my trusted advisor there about needing extra security. We set up a new trust account for my main funds, over $400,000 in savings I'd built over decades. To access it, I'd need notarized signatures and in-person verification. No emails or online tricks would touch it. Back home, I left my original checking account looking vulnerable. I transferred in a dummy balance of $100,000 from a separate holding, fake in the sense that I'd alerted the fraud team to watch it like hawks. I made the protections seem loose. Simple passwords, no extra alerts turned on. It was shiny bait, dangling right where Sam could see it if he poked around again. I even left my computer unlocked once or twice, with the account page open briefly. My wife noticed me being busier, but didn't ask much. Sam kept up his routine, bragging on calls and buying junk. But I waited, patient as ever, knowing his greed would pull him in. The bank was ready to freeze anything he tried. Sam couldn't resist bait that shiny. Sure enough, 3 days after setting the trap, my phone buzzed with a new email alert. I opened it in my study, door shut tight. It was another transfer confirmation from the bank, looking just as official as the others. This time, the amount hit me like a brick, the full $100,000 from my main account. Sam had gone all in, spoofing my email again to grab what he thought was easy money. He must have figured he'd drain me dry, leaving me scrambling. I leaned back in my chair, a grim smile creeping on my face. He'd fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. The dummy balance was gone, transferred straight to his account, or so he believed. But I'd already tipped off the fraud team. They were watching every move. The second he hit send, alarms went off on their end. I pictured him in his room, probably grinning at his screen, thinking he was untouchable. Maybe planning his next big buy, a car or a trip. My wife was out shopping, oblivious as ever. I didn't call anyone yet. I let the bank handle the first punch. Their system kicked in automatically, locking down the funds before they even settled. Sam had no clue his victory was a setup. He didn't know the bank had frozen every penny the moment he hit send. The banks freeze on the $100,000 hit like clockwork, and I got the call confirming it that afternoon. Now it was time to face Sam. I printed out the fraud alerts, the logs, everything I'd gathered. My hands were steady as I stacked the papers on the coffee table. My wife was out at her book club, so the house was quiet, just me and him. I called up to his room. "Sam, come down here. We need to talk." He sauntered in, hands in his pockets, that cocky look on his face like always. "What's up, Hector?" he asked, plopping onto the couch. I held up the printed alerts, showing the frozen transfer. "This. You tried to take $100,000 from my account." His eyes widened, but he played dumb right away. "What? No way, man. Must be hackers or something. I don't know anything about that." He even faked shock, leaning forward like he was concerned. But I wasn't buying it. I laid out the evidence one by one. The recordings of his phone calls, the Wi-Fi logs matching his device, the forged emails he'd spoofed, the test account drain. His smirk started to crack, his face turning pale as he flipped through the pages. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "You're finished, Sam," I said. But I wasn't done yet. My confrontation with Sam didn't stay private for long. The front door clicked open, and my wife burst into the living room, her face flushed from rushing home early. "Hector, what's all the yelling about? I could hear you from the driveway." She dropped her purse on the floor, eyes darting between us. Sam jumped up, his fake shock turning into a full performance. "Mom, thank God you're here," he said, his voice cracking like he was the victim. "Hector's accusing me of stealing his money. It's crazy. Must be some hacker messing with his accounts. Identity theft, you know? I swear, I didn't do anything." He even squeezed out a tear, wiping it away dramatically. "Please, tell him it's not me." She turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Hector, this can't be right. Sam's a good boy. He wouldn't do that. It has to be a mistake, like those scams on the news." To my disgust, she bought his story hook, line, and sinker. She hugged him, then looked at me begging, "Don't ruin his life over this. Let's call the police and sort it out properly." I stood there, papers in hand, feeling a wave of betrayal from her too. She chose to believe him without even looking at the evidence. That was the moment I realized I had to handle this alone. The bank's fraud team called me back a few days after the big freeze on the $100,000. I was in my study, sipping coffee, when the phone rang. "Mr. Hector, we've locked down your accounts and traced the spoof transfers," the specialist said. "The recipient's account, under Samuel Thompson, has been frozen too. We've flagged it all for a full fraud investigation. Do you want to press charges now?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence stack on my desk. Pressing charges would end it quick, maybe get him arrested. But that felt too simple, too merciful. Sam needed to feel the full weight of his greed, to watch everything crumble around him. "Not yet," I replied calmly. "I want to see how this plays out first. Keep me updated on the investigation." The specialist agreed, and we hung up. My wife was still defending him in her mind, but the bank's hold meant Sam couldn't touch a penny now, not his stolen cash, not even his own meager savings. I'd already tipped them off anonymously about the credit cards he'd opened in my name. The net was tightening, but I wasn't stopping there. I had a bigger plan to leave him with nothing. As the bank's investigation dug deeper, I uncovered more of Sam's tricks. One afternoon, while reviewing my credit report, I pulled a fresh one just to be sure. I spotted 2 new credit cards I never applied for. The balances were climbing fast, one at $5,000, the other pushing $3,000. Charges for video games, clothes, even a fancy phone. But the real kicker? The statements were mailed to his buddy's address across town, not here. He thought he was clever, hiding the trail like that. I printed the report and compared it to the timelines. The cards were opened right after the first $50,000 theft, using my name, social security number, everything. Identity theft, plain and simple. My blood ran hot thinking how he'd forged my info, probably while I was out mowing the lawn or something innocent. He'd been living it up on my credit, ruining my score in the process. I didn't confront him. Instead, I scanned the documents and emailed them straight to the bank's fraud team. "Here's more evidence," I wrote, tied directly to the suspect. They thanked me and said they'd add it to the file, notifying credit bureaus too. Now his name was smack in the middle of it all, no more hiding behind hackers. The paper trail was now undeniable. As the bank letters started rolling in over the next week, I watched Sam start to unravel right before my eyes. The first one was a fraud alert, addressed to him, warning about suspicious activity tied to his account. He ripped it open at the kitchen table, his face going pale as he read. "What the hell?" he muttered, crumpling it up and tossing it in the trash like it was junk mail. But I saw the sweat on his brow, the way his hands shook a little. He stopped swaggering around the house, no more flashing his new gadgets or bragging on late-night calls. Instead, he paced his room, avoiding eye contact at meals. "Rough day," I'd ask casually over breakfast, and he'd mumble some excuse about job stress or bad sleep. My wife fussed over him, thinking he was just down on his luck. "You'll bounce back, honey," she'd say, patting his arm. But I knew the truth. The freeze on his accounts meant he couldn't buy a candy bar without it bouncing. He thought maybe the hackers had turned on him, some outside force messing with his plans. The irony burned sweet. He started double-checking his phone, looking over his shoulder like paranoia had set in. I sipped my coffee across the table, acting concerned. He had no idea the hackers were sitting across the breakfast table. I wasn't done tightening the screws on Sam yet. After the bank froze his accounts and the fraud alerts piled up, I took it a step further. I filed a quiet report with the IRS, attaching copies of the spoofed transfers, the credit card fraud in my name, and the recordings where he bragged about easy money. I marked it as suspected tax evasion too, since he'd been dodging any real job while living off stolen cash. No way he'd reported that as income. I kept it anonymous at first, but the evidence pointed straight to him. The IRS moved faster than I expected. Within a couple of weeks, an official letter showed up in the mail, sealed and stamped, addressed right to Sam. It was thick, like it held bad news inside. I didn't open it. That wasn't my style. Instead, I slipped it onto his bed while he was out job hunting, which I knew meant hanging with friends. He found it that evening. I heard him rip it open upstairs, then dead silence. No calls to buddies, no gaming noises. Just quiet. My wife asked if he was okay at dinner, but he brushed her off, face pale. I acted like I knew nothing, eating my meal slow. That night, I heard him pacing his room until sunrise. The IRS letter was just the start. Over the next few days, more mail piled up for Sam. Collection notices from the credit card companies, demanding payment on the balances he'd racked up in my name. Then came the bank's final fraud alerts, copied to him as the linked account holder. They arrived in thick envelopes, stamped urgent. He tried to hide them, stuffing them in drawers, but my wife found one while cleaning his room. "Sam, what's this?" she asked him one evening, holding it up with a frown. He stammered some excuse about mistakes, but she wasn't buying it anymore. That night, she confronted me in the kitchen, her voice shaking. "Hector, tell me what's going on. These letters, they're in Sam's name. Is he in trouble?" I sighed and pulled out my evidence file, the recordings of his brags, the transfer logs, the spoofed emails, the fake accounts he'd set up. I laid it all on the table, explaining step by step how he'd stolen from me, bit by bit. She listened, her face going from doubt to horror. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she flipped through the papers. "How could he?" she whispered, covering her mouth. For the first time, she saw the truth, no more blind love shielding her. Her sobs filled the room. Sam was cornered from all sides. With my wife finally on board after seeing the full evidence, Sam couldn't hide anymore. The next morning, he knocked on my study door, looking like a cornered animal. His face was pale, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Hector, please," he begged, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. "I swear I'll change. It was a mistake, a stupid one. I was desperate, job market's tough. Just give me another chance. I'll pay it all back, every cent." He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. It was a pathetic show, but I felt no pity. I'd given him chances for years, free room, food, everything, while he stole behind my back. I pulled out a folder from my desk and slid it toward him. Inside were legal papers, revocation notices for his access to the house keys, the utility accounts in my name. Even the Wi-Fi password changed and blocked from his devices. "Your free ride ends today," I said coldly. "Pack your things and get out by noon." My wife stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face hard. She didn't stop me this time. Sam stammered more promises, but I turned away, done listening. He stumbled out, defeated. He had nowhere left to go. The fallout hit Sam like a freight train over the next few weeks. The bank didn't waste time. They seized every cent in his accounts, including the stolen funds he'd stashed away. The IRS jumped in too, flagging him for audits and potential evasion charges since he'd never declared the money as income. His credit score plummeted to nothing, tanking so low that even a basic loan for a bus ticket would get denied. Collection calls started pouring in for the cards he'd opened in my name, hounding him day and night. He tried to lean on his friends, calling them up begging for cash or a couch to crash on. But word spread fast in their circle. Once they heard about the fraud mess and realized he was flat broke, the lines went dead. No more invites to hang out, no loans, nothing. They ghosted him like he was poison. My wife watched it all with a heavy heart, but she didn't step in. "He made his bed," she said quietly one night, finally accepting the truth. By the end of the month, Sam had no choice. He packed what little he owned into a beat-up duffel bag, some clothes, his phone, a few gadgets that weren't worth much now. He slunk out the front door without a word, head down, avoiding our eyes. I watched him walk down the street, shoulders slumped, vanishing into the night. Weeks later, I sat in my study, sipping my morning coffee, the house feeling peaceful for the first time in months. My real funds were safe and untouched in that ironclad trust account, growing quietly like they should. No more worries about spoofs or sneaky transfers. I'd fixed my credit score too, disputing every fake charge Sam had made. The banks cleared it all, and I even got some compensation for the hassle. My wife and I talked more now, rebuilding what the betrayal had cracked. She missed her son, sure, but she saw how his choices had poisoned everything. "You did what you had to," she told me one night, holding my hand. As for Sam, his name was now blacklisted in every financial system that mattered. The IRS audit hit him hard, slapping fines he couldn't pay. Banks shut him out, no loans, no cards, nothing. His credit was in the gutter, a permanent scar from his own greed. He bounced between odd jobs and cheap motels, from what little I heard through mutual friends. No more flashy gadgets or easy life. I didn't destroy him with anger or shouts. I let him destroy himself, step by stupid step, with every lie and theft piling up like a house of cards that finally fell. And I'll admit it, I don't regret a single step. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.